here to kind of talk a little bit about this clock that I made. I've been calling it an epoxy curved clock. So what drove me to do something like this? I've never done anything with epoxy before. I had seen a lot of river tables before, and it's something I'm starting to get into as well, with the different colors and using some mica powder to color it. And I really wanted a clock, so I decided to mix them and combine them. Most of my work, being in woodworking, is always square, and so then I came up with an idea. I actually sketched it in a book first, and then worked on bringing it to life. I'll go through and I'll talk about some of the things I learned while doing this. Would I do it again? Maybe. Obviously with a few changes. Probably took me a little longer than I was expecting as well, but really fun project, and now I have a cool clock. So some lessons I've learned from this project is the curved pieces that I had them at 1/4 inch. I would definitely recommend having them more at like 1/8 of an inch. Soaking those thin slices of wood overnight in like a pail. I had tried boiling them the first time, and they cooled off so quickly that I had to stick them back in a bucket again just to be able to use them. The third would be take your time bending. It'll get there. You just have to do them in intervals. I had tried doing it all at once because I was impatient, and it led to some of them snapping, so I had to start those ones all over again. You can see here that these are stained. I wouldn't recommend staining these curved pieces until later. I ended up having to do a lot of sanding anyway, and all the stain came off. I had epoxied the lettering. It wouldn't be my first choice to do it again. I don't think it turned out super clean. I don't have any kind of stencil though, so I didn't have any way to really fix it. Number 6 would be burning the wood. It helped make the grain pop a little more for me, and I kind of like that look. And then the 7th would be taping the bottom of the clock so I could remove the drip from the epoxy on the backside a lot easier than it was. So as you can see here, I'm taking these little squares I created. They're about 1/2 inch thick, the same exact thickness as the rest of it. And I'm putting them in between the curved pieces. This allowed for it to change the way it was looking as I was doing it. It did take time, so there's lots of pauses in between here as I had to cut and fix them as they went. So rinse and repeat basically on the other side. You can see here that I struggled more to get this one to bend. The angle I had created in the main centerpiece was a little bit too tight, and I found this side to be a little harder, but I did eventually make it work, just a little extra glue and some more brad nails and some patience. I then made a mold out of cardboard, taped the bottom pieces of it because I didn't have any kind of mold that would work for this. This allowed me to pour the epoxy into it and not have it leak everywhere. So you can see here I'm opening my epoxy resin. I used a 1:1 ratio resin. It's basically a hard tabletop resin. I combined 2 different types of mica powder to create the look for both the green and the blue. The green kind of combined a little bit of goldish brown, and the blue I combined a little bit of like a silvery tone. The important thing when mixing epoxy is to make sure that your ratios are correct. Otherwise it might cool too quickly, or it might be tacky yet and never harden officially. Another really important thing is as you're stirring, you're going to see a lot of bubbles show up, and that's perfectly normal. Make sure to follow the instructions on the epoxy that you got, but typically you need to stir it for a good 3 to 5 minutes, and then you need to let it sit for at least 5 to get the remaining bubbles out. So here you can see me pouring in the resin I had just created. I used green on top and blue on the bottom. I found out that I only made enough to do one side, so here I am mixing again. You can see my kids pop in, they're all curious about it. They absolutely loved watching me do this, so rinse and repeat, I guess, on the other side. One important thing you see here that I'm doing is adding weights. That's critical because otherwise the wood floats up, and you can see that I ended up still getting some epoxy on the underside, which is why next step I am removing the epoxy using a planer. There was just too much on both sides for me to want to sand there all day. I also had some really old blades in my planer that I was getting ready to switch out anyway, so didn't feel super guilty if it ended up ruining my blades. Took several passes, but I used them in very small increments just to make sure I didn't wreck anything. Now here I am sanding. I used 120 grit. I did end up working all the way up to 220, but I don't show all of it because sanding's boring, so spare you the boring. Here I used some water-based paint to try to restain the curved pieces. It worked a little bit, but I did end up still needing to do a lot of sanding, so burning the wood ended up working better than going with this stain. After I get done staining these curved pieces, I go through with a polishing oil for the rest of the wood, which I actually thought really brought out some of those grain pieces. Alright, so here you can see me mixing up epoxy again. This is for my top coat. Smoothing it out just like I did before and making sure that I get all the way around it and removing any bubbles with a toothpick. Alright, so this is how it turned out. You can see, there's lots of these little pockets where the epoxy absorbed into the wood, which is expected during your first round. And then obviously the underside, I have a lot of the pooling. So what I'm going to do off camera, so you guys don't have to be bored, is I'm going to sand this back down, and we're going to get some of the numbers on here as well. And then I'm going to put another coat of epoxy on. Alright, so this is what she looks like after. I put a little more conditioning back on it, and now I'm going to go and I'm going to put the numbers on. You'll see me here taping the stencil. This just makes sure it stays in place as I'm working. I decided to use epoxy again. I dyed it with some gray, and then just started painting it in like a normal painter would. Up next, it's time to drill the hole. So I made sure I grabbed some cardboard in case I went through. I unfortunately did not have the size hole that was needed for the back piece, so you'll see me here taking out different drill bit sizes and just trying to get as close as I can. I did end up having to bang it in a little bit and twist it around and make the hole bigger because I still did not have a drill bit large enough for it. Now that I've got the clock piece fitting in, I grabbed some polishing pads and some polishing oil again, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to buff it out. I'm going to put on a couple of layers. It kind of provides a nice soft sandy surface to really bring out the epoxy and make it shine a little more. I'll spare you the boredom, and I'll go really quick here. And then final steps after I'm done buffing this out a couple of times is just to put the clock pieces back on with the arms, and then you'll have my final product. Well, if you like this video or like what you saw, feel free to like, follow, or subscribe. Thanks again for watching. I'll have a lot of the tools that I used in the details below if you're interested.